A really useful feature in Windows Server 2003 is the ability for you to use a web browser to perform common administrative tasks on Windows Server 2003. In this exercise, we're going to walk through the steps that are required to install and use the web interface for remote administration. So the first step is to install this feature, which is not installed by default. So we'll click on Start, Settings, Control Panel, and Add or Remove Programs. Specifically, what we're interested in is the Add Remove Windows Components section. And once this loads, we're going to double click on the Application Server item. Now, the web interface for remote administration is actually part of the Internet Information Services feature. So we have to have a web server installed and configured on the machine in order for this feature to work. On the Windows Components section, I'll double click on the Application Server role to be able to drill down to the various options for the application server. Then I'll double click on Internet Information Services. And finally, I'll double click on Worldwide Web Service. The option that I want is Remote Administration, HTML. So I'll place a check mark in that box. You'll notice that when I do that, it also enables several other options, including the World Wide Web Service. Again, this is because the remote administration functionality depends on and requires the World Wide Web Service and Internet Information Services in general. So to save that option, I'll click OK until I return to the Windows Components section. And then to start the installation, I'll click the Next button. Okay, we've jumped ahead a little bit here, so we're still waiting for the configuration of the additional components that we've decided to install. Okay, now we've jumped ahead to completing the Windows Components wizard. So we've basically installed all of the components that we need in order to use the remote administration HTML tools. So to finish this, I'll click the Finish button, and then I'll close the Add or Remove Programs dialog box. Now that we've installed the proper tools, let's go ahead and take a look at some of the features that are available through a web browser on Windows Server 2003. So I can do this by clicking on Start, Programs, Administrative Tools, and the Web Interface for Remote Administration. When I click this link, basically it'll open up Internet Explorer, or my default browser, and it'll connect me to the machine name, a colon, and then the port number of 8098. This is the default port that the web interface responds on. Since this is a secure site, the first thing that you'll be prompted for is a username and password. So I'll go ahead and enter in my administrator username and password. Now we've logged on to the web administration tools, and we'll be able to see that there are very many different tasks that can be performed in Windows Server 2003. For example, on the first page, you can take a tour, which will kind of walk you through the various features that are available in the web interface for administration. However, if you're used to using a web browser or navigating websites that have complex navigation, you should have no problem using this tool without further instructions. So let's take a look at some of the options that are available. The navigation is laid out such that the blue items in this bar here are the major categories of different types of information that can be displayed. When you click on one of those, for example, when I click on Status, the information below that will actually show up in this bar here, and it'll show you the various tasks that are available. For example, when I click on Status, I can go to System Information. And so I can choose to perform tasks, for example, setting up the date and time on the server, setting up alert email addresses, or installing any certificates that might be required. Let's take a look at some other options. When I click on Sites, this is basically going to be the Internet Information Services configuration. So you'll notice that the default websites that are created when you install IIS are the only ones that show up here. And so I can actually perform administration tasks. For example, I can select the default website and choose to pause, stop, or start this website as I need to. If I click on the web server task, there's different settings that I can set up for IIS as well. So for example, I can set up settings for FTP service, I can set up settings for logging of information, and even set permissions from this interface. Moving on to network. I can choose to set some of the network settings that you'd expect to do through the Windows Server 2003 interface. For example, I can set the server's name and domain membership. So for example, if I want to have this computer join a domain, I can do that from here. Common system administration tasks can be performed from the users function. And here, for example, I can view local users and local groups on this server. So I'll go ahead and click on the local groups section. Now this machine is functioning as a Windows Server 2003 Active Directory domain controller. So actually the administration features that I have here are not going to be all that useful. Unfortunately, the Active Directory Users and Computers tool cannot be accessed through this web interface. So you'll notice that I have all of the groups, local groups that I have defined on the computer listed here. So I have account operators, administrators, backup operators, etc. I can create new groups or view the properties for any existing groups as well. This is a helpful way for you to be able to do some basic systems administration for your users using a web browser. And finally, we'll take a look at the maintenance section. In this section, you'll see several useful web-based tools. For example, a tool to set the date and time on your servers, the logs section, which is basically like the event viewer, the ability to set up an alert email address. So whenever alerts are set up for the system, you can be notified via email. You can also perform more advanced options. For example, you can shut down or restart the server remotely or at a scheduled time using the maintenance features here. You can also launch a remote desktop session. So as you've probably noticed, you can't perform all of the Windows 2003 tasks using the web-based HTML interface. So in some cases, you might want to create a remote desktop connection so you can actually log on to the system and perform other tasks. For here, let's go ahead and take a look at the logs section. And we'll take a quick look at the system event log so we can see some of the information that's actually available here. Although the basic user interface looks a bit different from the actual graphical event viewer application, you'll notice that you can view the same types of information. For example, you can view the details for any of the events that show up in the list. You can search for events by just doing a simple query. And you can even download the logs. So you can choose to save a binary log file so that you can view it in the local machine's event viewer application. Overall, as you can see, there's many features in the web-based administration tools that are included with the Web Administration HTML interface. This is a great way to perform some common routine Windows Server 2003 tasks using a simple web browser.